Gravel cut into Emily's bare feet as she ran, her breath ragged in the cold night air. The compound walls loomed tall, shadows swallowing the moonlight. Behind her, a door slammed with finality, and terror pressed down like a weight. Emily whispered. I can still hear her voice. She wasn't alone, though she wished she were. The whisper trailed like smoke through the darkness, her sister's voice calling from within. Reverend Thomas's chant echoed in the courtyard, steady and low, commanding silence from the crowd that lingered unseen. The words were sharp, binding, like chains forged of scripture, twisted into control. Jacob muttered, "Run faster," but Emily's legs trembled. He was only 15, too young to carry such fear, yet his eyes already reflected years of obedience beaten into him. A figure blocked the path. Samuel, the enforcer, his frame rigid and unmoving. He raised a lantern, and its glow lit the terror in Emily's face. His silence was more threatening than words. Sarah's scream pierced the night, but it was cut short, as though swallowed whole by the compound itself. Emily's heart surged, her hands shaking as she pressed Jacob behind her. Reverend Thomas said, "None escape salvation." His voice rose, sweet and poisonous. Emily felt the ground tilt, her fear pulling her backward into the nightmare. Emily whispered, "Anna, is that you?" The voice of her sister seemed to call again, soft, fragile, pleading. Yet Anna had vanished years ago, absorbed into the compound's secrets. The cold air burned Emily's lungs, her bare feet bleeding as gravel tore into them. She wanted freedom, but the compound was a maze of gates, walls, and shadows that seemed alive. Her eyes met Samuel's. He did not move, yet his presence crushed her hope. Behind his silence, she saw flickers of doubt, but they were gone as quickly as they appeared, swallowed by duty. Emily pressed her back against the wall, dragging Jacob with her. She whispered, "Stay quiet." The compound's silence was unnatural, broken only by the crunch of Samuel's boots. The walls felt alive, their shadows creeping. Jacob whispered, "Why is Anna calling?" His voice trembled like glass ready to break. Emily couldn't answer. The thought clawed at her mind. Anna was gone, yet her voice wrapped around them like a chain. Reverend Thomas's voice rose again from the courtyard, each syllable sharp. He said, "Sacrifice is salvation." Emily felt the words pierce her, as if they were aimed directly at her heart. The air smelled of damp stone and burnt oil. Her lungs tightened, her body frozen between the urge to run and the need to protect Jacob. She thought of her sister's laughter once, soft and human. Now, only echoes. The torchlight flickered near, and Emily shoved Jacob into a crevice. Samuel's lantern swayed closer, casting beams across the wall. Emily prayed he would not see them. The compound seemed to breathe with him. Emily's breath slowed as Samuel paused near them. He lifted the lantern high, its orange glow grazing the wall. For a heartbeat, Emily was sure his eyes had locked with hers. She gripped Jacob tighter. Samuel's silence was a weapon sharper than a blade. Jacob whispered, "He sees us." But Samuel turned his head away. Emily's chest surged with relief, though she knew it was temporary. From the courtyard came chanting, dozens of voices rising together in rhythm. Emily shivered as the sound crawled up her spine, every word pressing her deeper into dread. Her thoughts blurred with memory, Anna standing beside her once, singing hymns before dawn. That same voice now whispered, calling her back, luring her toward captivity. Emily said, "We're not going back." Yet her voice shook with doubt, her resolve trembling against the weight of fear. She felt the compound tightening, ready to close around them again. The chanting swelled until it drowned her heartbeat. Emily covered Jacob's ears, whispering, "Don't listen." His eyes filled with tears. She could feel his body shaking, as if the words themselves poisoned him. Reverend Thomas's voice cut through the chorus. He said, "The lost return when called." Emily's veins turned to ice. It felt like Anna's voice was stitched into his words. Jacob said, "It sounds like her." His lips trembled as he looked to Emily, searching for answers. She pressed her hand against his mouth, afraid Samuel might hear. The night pressed heavier, the air thick with smoke and incense. Emily felt trapped in a cage without bars, the walls themselves suffocating her. Her resolve cracked. She whispered, "If Anna is alive, we must find her." The words escaped before she could stop them, and her fear deepened at the thought. The voices fell silent all at once, leaving the air heavy. Emily's breath echoed louder than she wanted. Samuel's lantern dimmed as if the flame itself bowed to Reverend Thomas's command. Reverend Thomas said, "The Spirit guides us." His words slid across the compound like venom, and Emily felt her chest constrict. She thought she heard Anna whisper again, soft but close, too close. Jacob clung to her, whispering, "She's here." Emily fought the terror rising in her throat, unsure whether it was madness or truth unraveling before her. Samuel turned, his eyes passing over them. For a moment, Emily saw weariness, even doubt. But then his jaw tightened, and he resumed his post like stone. Emily whispered, "We must move before dawn." The walls seemed to listen, and she knew their chance at freedom was closing like the gates that trapped them. The night eased, but Emily's heart did not. She remembered the first day she followed Anna into the compound, searching for belonging after their mother's death. The promise of family was sweeter than freedom itself. Reverend Thomas had greeted them with open arms. He said, "You are safe now." His words filled the hollow places inside her chest, places carved by grief. Emily believed him because she wanted to. Anna had smiled then, her eyes bright with hope. She said, "We finally belong somewhere." Emily clung to that moment, even as it rotted into chains. Her sister's faith had become her prison. Jacob had been born inside these walls. He never knew another life. His small joys, his small laughs, they all belonged to the compound. Emily wondered if he could ever know freedom. Samuel had once looked at her differently. A kindness flickered in his silence, but it was fleeting. The leader's shadow swallowed him whole. She wondered if that humanity remained beneath his rigid shell. Emily whispered, "I stayed because I was afraid of being alone." Her words tasted bitter. She had traded her freedom for a false sense of family, and the cost was greater than she imagined. The dormitory walls carried whispers of prayer. Emily recalled nights when Anna would press her hand and say, "We are chosen." Her voice had been warm, but it chilled Emily now in memory. Reverend Thomas's sermons had promised healing, salvation, rebirth. Emily believed them because she wanted her pain buried, not faced. She wondered if weakness had been her doorway into the trap. Jacob stirred in his sleep, whispering fragments of the chants. Emily shuddered. Even in dreams the doctrine claimed him. She pressed his hand to her chest, silently begging the world outside to exist for him. Samuel had stood in corners like a sentinel. He rarely spoke, but his gaze followed them like iron bars. Once he had dropped bread in Emily's hand when no one looked. She wondered if that was his rebellion. The longing for Anna's presence was sharp. Emily whispered, "I hear you." Whether it was memory or madness, she could not tell. The ache of losing her sister was her anchor and her torment. Morning bells rang harshly, their clang cutting through Emily's fragile thoughts. She remembered her first ritual when Reverend Thomas said, "Pain cleanses." His smile then had looked like love, but tasted of fear. Anna had clutched her hand during that ritual, trembling but devoted. Emily had envied her faith, mistaking it for strength. Now, she knew it was surrender disguised as salvation. Jacob rose, rubbing his tired eyes. He said, "I don't want to go." Emily wanted to tell him they would escape, but her tongue froze. Hope was dangerous here, even whispered in shadows. Samuel appeared with his lantern, his eyes empty of choice. He said nothing, but the silence screamed obedience. Emily wondered how many times he had silenced doubts until they were buried. Reverend Thomas's voice filled the courtyard as the flock gathered. He said, "Sacrifice is proof of love." Emily's stomach twisted. She had once believed those words were holy. Now they burned like ash. The courtyard filled with chanting, rhythmic and suffocating. Emily thought of nights when she joined willingly, her voice blending with Anna's. The memory was bitter, yet it revealed why she had stayed. She had wanted connection, something greater than herself. Reverend Thomas offered it with words dipped in honey. He said, "You are my children." The sound of it healed her grief, even as it trapped her deeper. Jacob whispered, "Why do they sound happy?" Emily could not explain. She only knew happiness here was borrowed, conditional, fragile as glass. Samuel's eyes passed over her as the chants rose. For a fleeting second, his lips moved without sound. She thought he was praying, but to whom? She could not tell. Emily's longing for Anna sharpened again. She whispered, "You stayed for her." The words were knives in her chest. She had stayed for family, but family had been devoured by devotion. The ritual ended, leaving the silence heavier than sound. Emily recalled how Anna once whispered, "We are safe here." That memory now felt cruel, but it reminded her why she had endured. Reverend Thomas lowered his arms, his eyes sweeping across the flock like a shepherd surveying sheep. He said, "Love binds us." Emily clenched her fists. Love had bound her once too tightly to break. Jacob pressed against her side, whispering, "I want to leave." His voice was small, but it carried the truth she feared most. The moment was fragile, yet it flickered like fire inside her. Samuel turned away, his robe brushing gravel. Emily watched his shoulders, searching for the humanity buried deep. Once he had been broken like her. Could he remember it still? Emily's chest tightened. She whispered, "I stayed for Anna, but I'll leave for you." The vow left her trembling, but it was the first step toward freedom carved in her heart. The morning drills began with sharp whistles cutting through the compound. Emily's body moved out of habit, though every step felt like shackles. She remembered when these routines seemed like belonging. Reverend Thomas walked among them, voice booming with control. He said, "Order is salvation." His words cracked like whips across the air, and Emily's skin prickled as if struck. Jacob stumbled, his legs weak from hunger. A guard shoved him forward. Emily's chest burned as she caught him, whispering, "Stay steady." She felt the eyes of Samuel watching from the edge. Samuel's presence was suffocating. He stood rigid, lantern replaced by a staff. His silence was louder than any shout, his gaze crushing disobedience before it bloomed. Anna's voice whispered in Emily's head, soft and desperate. It pulled her back into memories of nights, when chants sounded like comfort instead of chains. The contrast clawed at her heart. Emily thought, if we falter, we are punished. The drills were not about strength, but obedience. They stripped them down until even thought felt like treason. The drills ended, but punishment followed. A girl no older than Jacob had dropped a loaf of bread. The silence broke with Reverend Thomas's voice. He said, "Discipline is mercy." The crowd hushed. Emily clutched Jacob's hand, pulling him back as Samuel stepped forward. His face was unreadable, his staff raised like judgment itself. The girl cried, "Please." Her words echoed, fragile against stone walls. Emily's stomach twisted. She remembered Anna's cries years ago, silenced by ritual. Samuel struck once, clean and heavy. Emily flinched. Jacob hid his face against her arm, trembling. Emily whispered, "Don't look." Her throat ached with rage she dared not speak aloud. Reverend Thomas raised his hand, calling the punishment holy. He said, "Pain brings purity." The words sickened Emily. She felt chains tightening inside her ribs, suffocating her. Emily thought, this is control through fear. She hated herself for standing still, but she feared Jacob's small body breaking under Samuel's staff if she moved. The drills gave way to prayers, endless chanting that blurred thought. Emily's voice joined unwillingly, the rhythm dragging her into the tide. She remembered how easily she once believed. Reverend Thomas said, "Obedience is truth." The crowd echoed him like a wave. Emily's lips moved, but her heart rebelled. She thought of Anna's voice, once joyful, now only chains. Jacob whispered between chants, "Why must we say this?" Emily pressed his hand, whispering, "To survive." The words poisoned her, but they kept him alive. Samuel patrolled the lines, his eyes scanning. His silence was its own sermon. Emily wondered if he had ever asked the same question Jacob dared to ask. The chanting grew louder, filling the air like smoke. Emily's chest felt tight, her mind screaming against the repetition. The walls seemed to echo her defiance, though she dared not show it. That night, Emily sat by the fire pit, her body aching. Jacob leaned against her, whispering, "I can't do this anymore." His voice was weak, but sharp with truth. Emily said, "You must endure." Yet her words rang hollow. She was torn between protecting him and breaking the rules that kept them both alive. Samuel stood at the edge of the firelight, his shadow long against the walls. His eyes flickered briefly toward her, a glance that carried both warning and something unspoken. Reverend Thomas approached, his robe swaying. He said, "The weak must learn or perish." His gaze lingered on Jacob. Emily's heart froze, rage buried beneath trembling obedience. Anna's voice echoed again, calling her name from the darkness. Emily whispered, "I will not lose him too." Her vow burned silently, even as fear pressed her into silence. The night deepened, and silence returned. Emily lay awake, Jacob's breath soft against her arm. She thought of Anna, remembering her smile before the cult consumed it. The memory was sharper than the present. Reverend Thomas's words echoed in her skull. "Disobedience is death." She wondered if Anna's voice was warning or temptation. Each whisper grew harder to resist. Samuel patrolled outside, his boots grinding gravel. Emily wondered if he was man or machine, so deeply bound he could not break. Yet she swore she saw hesitation once, faint as smoke. Emily whispered to herself, "I will endure, but not forever." Her heart trembled with the dangerous seed of rebellion. If Jacob had courage enough to speak truth, she had no excuse left. The walls loomed taller in the moonlight, shadows pressing close. Emily closed her eyes, whispering Anna's name. She did not know if it was a prayer, a memory, or the beginning of defiance. The night was heavy with smoke as Emily gathered water near the well. A faint rustle came from behind. She turned, expecting Samuel, but instead found Anna. Her breath froze in her chest. Anna whispered, "Why did you leave me?" Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, her voice trembling like broken glass. Emily's body ached with longing, but terror rooted her feet. Emily said, "You're alive." The words tasted like ash. She wanted to run to her sister, but the fear in Anna's eyes told her this was no reunion, but a warning. Anna's lips quivered as she said, "I chose him. I chose Reverend Thomas." The words struck Emily harder than any staff. Betrayal laced her sister's voice, sharp and merciless. Jacob emerged, rubbing his eyes, whispering, "Is it her?" Emily held him close, shielding him as if Anna's presence were fire. Her heart cracked with the truth unraveling before her. Emily whispered, "You gave yourself to him." Anna's silence confirmed it. The cult had not stolen her. She had surrendered willingly. The revelation shattered everything Emily clung to. Reverend Thomas appeared from the shadows, his crimson robe glowing faintly in torchlight. He said, "Your sister chose truth." His words cut deep, his smile sharp as a blade. Emily's stomach churned. She remembered the day Anna pledged loyalty, thinking it was salvation. Now she saw the rot beneath the vow, the leader's hand guiding every word. Jacob clutched her dress. He whispered, "She's different." Emily could not deny it. The girl she once knew had been consumed, her laughter turned into a weapon of faith. Anna's eyes shimmered as she whispered, "I did it for us." Emily's heart cracked. Love twisted into betrayal, devotion weaponized into chains that bound her tighter than walls. Samuel stepped forward, silent as ever, staff firm in hand. His shadow fell across Emily, and she wondered if he too had witnessed this transformation before. Emily whispered, "You're lost." Anna's face faltered for only a moment, but Reverend Thomas's hand gripped her shoulder, steadying her into loyalty once more. Reverend Thomas's voice rose, echoing across the courtyard. He said, "Blood binds, family binds, even betrayal binds." His words turned Anna's presence into a blade pressed against Emily's throat. Anna's eyes filled with tears. She said, "He saved me." Emily wanted to scream, but her voice caught. She remembered their childhood laughter, now poisoned by devotion. Jacob whispered, "She's lying." His small hand gripped Emily's tightly, his defiance shining despite fear. Emily held him close, knowing his courage was the only flame left in the dark. Samuel's gaze flickered, resting briefly on Emily. His jaw tightened. For a heartbeat, humanity flashed, then disappeared behind obedience again. Emily whispered, "He took you, Anna." But Anna shook her head. "I chose." The words split Emily's heart, leaving her gasping. Freedom for Anna had been surrender. The compound walls felt closer, the shadows heavier. Emily realized escape was not only from Reverend Thomas, but also from the betrayal of blood itself. The chanting began again, echoing in the courtyard. Reverend Thomas said, "Choose loyalty or choose death." His eyes fixed on Emily, daring her to speak. Anna's hand reached out. She said, "Come back with us. Stay." Her voice wavered, torn between sisterly love and cult devotion. Emily's chest burned with grief. Jacob whispered, "Don't." His small voice rang like truth. Emily pressed her hand over his, her resolve trembling but unbroken. Samuel stepped forward, his staff striking the ground. The sound echoed like thunder. His eyes lingered on Emily, as if pleading silently, but his body obeyed the leader's command. Emily whispered, "I can't." The words were small, yet they shattered Anna. Her sister's face crumpled before Reverend Thomas's grip tightened, pulling her back into obedience. The betrayal solidified. Emily knew then Anna was not her ally, but her jailer, her blood bound tighter to the leader than to her own sister. Silence followed the chant. Reverend Thomas lowered his arms, smiling with victory. He said, "Your blood belongs to me now." Emily's chest ached, fury burning beneath her fear. Anna's eyes no longer looked like her own. She said, "I love him." Emily's breath broke. That love had once belonged to family, but now it was twisted beyond recognition. Jacob whispered, "She's gone." His truth cut deeper than Anna's betrayal. Emily pressed her forehead to his, whispering, "Then we only have each other." Samuel turned away, his silence louder than a scream. Emily swore she saw his hand tremble, but he walked back into shadow. Reverend Thomas's voice rang, final and cruel. "Tomorrow you will kneel, or tomorrow you will die." Emily's eyes burned with tears, but inside her heart, rebellion sparked alive. She whispered, "I will not kneel." Her vow echoed louder in her soul than any chant, sharper than betrayal, stronger than fear. The night was sharp with silence. Emily pressed Jacob's hand and whispered, "Tonight." Her voice shook, but her heart pounded with raw defiance. The compound walls loomed like giants in the moonlight. Jacob's eyes widened. He said, "Well, die." His words trembled, but Emily shook her head. She whispered, "We'll live." She clung to that fragile hope like breath itself. Samuel's boots crunched nearby as he paced. Emily hid behind the shadows of the dormitory wall. His lantern glow cut across the gravel, sweeping dangerously close. Reverend Thomas's words echoed from memory. "Disobedience is death." Emily clenched her jaw, rage boiling. Fear and defiance warred inside her. But Jacob's small fingers anchored her to resolve. The faint whisper of Anna's voice drifted again. "Stay." It stabbed Emily's heart. She pressed her hands against her ears. "No," she hissed, trembling but steady. The gates seemed impossibly far. Emily whispered, "When the lantern turns, we run." Jacob nodded, though tears streaked his cheeks. The moment was sealed. The lantern turned. Emily yanked Jacob's hand, their feet pounding gravel. Breath tore through her lungs as the cold air bit her skin. The compound stretched endless, but freedom pulsed ahead. Samuel spun, staff slamming ground. His shout cut like thunder. Emily ran harder, dragging Jacob with desperate strength. She whispered, "Don't stop." The gates loomed, iron teeth glowing faint in the moonlight. Emily's heart surged, but dread followed. Reverend Thomas's voice rang out behind them. "Seize them." Followers rushed from the shadows, robes flaring, faces blank with devotion. Emily's legs screamed, but she pushed forward. Jacob gasped, clutching her arm, his voice breaking. "Faster!" The world shrank to sound. Boots, chants, her heartbeat roaring. Emily whispered, "Freedom is this way." Her vow was sharp, fierce, and unbreakable. Samuel blocked their path, staff raised high. His shadow stretched like a wall itself. Emily skidded to a stop, Jacob stumbling against her side. Her chest heaved, rage and fear colliding. Reverend Thomas stepped into view, crimson robe trailing like blood. He said, "You defy salvation." His voice was calm, dangerous, and final. Emily's knees shook, but her spirit did not bend. Anna appeared behind him, eyes wet but steady. She said, "Come back. Don't do this." Her voice cracked, torn between sister and disciple. Emily's heart ripped open, but resolve sealed the wound. Jacob whispered, "Don't listen." His small voice was steel. Emily held him close, whispering, "I will never kneel." The words cracked the night louder than any chant. Samuel's jaw tightened. His staff trembled in his grip for the first time. His silence screamed conflict, but his body moved forward anyway, loyal to command. The standoff cracked like thunder. Samuel swung his staff, aiming to break Emily. She shoved Jacob aside and ducked, the staff grazing stone. Sparks flew, screams rang out. Emily grabbed a rock, striking Samuel's arm. For a moment his grip faltered. His eyes met hers, full of buried humanity. Then Reverend Thomas roared, "Strike her down!" Jacob screamed, "No!" His small voice echoed with defiance, shattering the silence. Anna's face crumpled, her tears streaking as she whispered, "Stop!" Yet no one moved but Emily. Emily's body shook, but her voice steadied. She shouted, "You will not own us!" Her scream was raw, tearing through her throat, shaking even the most loyal faces in the crowd. Samuel froze. His staff hovered, hesitation burning in his eyes. For the first time, obedience trembled against rebellion. The moment balanced like a blade between life and death. Time broke open in that instant. Samuel lowered his staff, sweat dripping from his brow. His silence spoke louder than any vow. He could not strike her. Reverend Thomas's face twisted in rage. He screamed, "Coward!" His voice echoed across the compound. Followers shifted uneasily, cracks forming in their devotion. Emily seized the moment, grabbing Jacob's hand and running toward the gate. Anna cried, "Don't leave me!" Her voice pierced Emily's chest, but she did not turn. She whispered, "You chose him." The words burned as she flung them into the night. Samuel stepped aside, blocking no longer. His eyes locked with Emily's, silent plea carved in them. She nodded once, knowing he had given her a sliver of hope. The gates loomed open, just enough. Emily's feet bled, Jacob stumbled, but freedom burned in sight. Reverend Thomas shouted, "Seize them!" Yet the moment had already shifted. The gates clanged shut behind them, leaving the compound's chants muffled by stone. Emily dragged Jacob through the dark fields, their breaths ragged, their bodies bleeding but alive. Jacob whispered, "Are we free?" His words wavered. Emily pressed his hand tight and said, "We're away but not free." The compound's shadow stretched inside her heart. The night air smelled of wet earth. Emily inhaled deeply, but every breath carried the weight of memory. Anna's face lingered in her mind, eyes filled with loyalty she couldn't break. Samuel's silence haunted her too. His choice to lower the staff had given them this chance. She whispered, "Thank you," though he would never hear it. Jacob stumbled, collapsing to the ground. Emily lifted him, whispering, "One step more." Tears blurred her vision, but her resolve burned brighter than the torches they left behind. She thought, survival is not peace, it is endurance. The compound was miles away, yet its voice still echoed inside her skull, a chain unbroken. They found a hollow beneath trees where shadows concealed them. Emily pressed Jacob against her chest, wrapping arms around him as if her body could shield him from memory. Jacob said, "She wanted you to stay." His voice cracked with grief. Emily whispered, "She was already gone." The truth hurt sharper than stone, but it was the only truth left. She remembered Anna's eyes shimmering with devotion, the betrayal buried in love. Her heart throbbed. "Blood doesn't always save," she whispered, words trembling with sorrow. Jacob clutched her hand tighter. He said, "You saved me." Tears stung her eyes. She thought, that must be enough. Yet guilt burned, knowing Anna's voice still lingered inside her head. The night was colder away from firelight. Emily whispered, "Sleep now. I'll keep watch." Jacob's body trembled until exhaustion pulled him into restless dreams. Emily sat awake, haunted by silence. Dawn crept slowly, light pale against broken clouds. Emily's eyes stung from sleeplessness, but Jacob stirred, whispering, "It feels different here." His words carried fragile wonder. Emily touched his hair softly. She said, "It's the world. The real one." Yet her chest tightened, because freedom still felt unreal. The cult's chains clung to her mind. She thought of Reverend Thomas's voice, thunderous and poisonous. She thought of Samuel lowering his staff, a silent defiance. She thought of Anna whispering, "Stay." Every memory was a scar. Jacob said, "Will he follow?" Emily's throat burned. She whispered, "Maybe." Fear laced every word, but she would not let it crush him. She stared at the horizon, the rising sun faint gold. It should have felt warm, but all she saw was a battlefield of shadows stretching behind her. The morning grew, and Emily led Jacob toward a narrow stream. He knelt, drinking greedily, water dripping down his face. Emily watched, torn between relief and sorrow. Jacob said, "It tastes better than anything." She smiled weakly, remembering how cult rations tasted of ash. Freedom was in the small things, yet it carried weight. Emily cupped water in her hands, staring at her reflection. She saw a woman hollowed by fear, scarred by memory, yet alive. She whispered, "You survive." The words cracked but true. Anna's reflection shimmered beside hers, memory haunting. Emily whispered, "You chose him." She splashed water, shattering the ghost, but it remained in her chest. Jacob asked, "Where do we go?" Emily whispered, "Away." She had no answer, only the will to keep moving. It was not a plan, but survival was enough for now. By midday, Emily and Jacob reached a ridge overlooking far hills. The compound was only a scar on the horizon, smoke curling faint into the sky. Jacob whispered, "We made it." Emily placed her arm around him, whispering, "We began." Her voice was steady, though her eyes stung. Survival was not victory, only the start of carrying scars forward. She thought of Samuel's silent defiance. She thought of Anna's betrayal, her voice still threading through the wind. Freedom came with loss heavier than chains. Jacob asked, "Will it stop hurting?" Emily whispered, "No, but we'll learn to live." She wanted to believe it, though her heart carried doubt. The wind was cold but clean, untainted by incense or chance. Emily inhaled, letting the ache remain. Survival was her vow, but healing was a journey she did not yet know. Emily and Jacob sat near a dying fire. Jacob whispered, "Is it over?" Emily pressed his hand. "The walls are gone, but not the voices." Her eyes stayed fixed on the dark trees. Jacob dreamed in fragments of chance. Emily whispered, "They scarred you too." She turned to the trees, hearing Anna's faint voice. "Stay." Emily's jaw tightened. "You chose him." At dawn they reached a ridge. Smoke curled faint on the horizon. Jacob whispered, "Will they follow?" Emily said, "Maybe, but we walk forward." Her eyes burned with both fear and defiance. At a stream, Emily's reflection warped into Anna's hollow eyes. Jacob asked, "What's wrong?" Emily whispered, "Nothing, keep moving." Inside, she knew scars traveled with her. That night Jacob asked, "Will it end?" Emily whispered, "No, we carry it." She pressed her forehead to his. Her final words cut the dark. "I still hear her calling."